Welcome back to the Mind and Money podcast. I'm Val, a financial planner.
And I'm Sherry, a financial coach. And today we're excited that we have a guest joining us. So this is Julie. Julie has lots of education and experience helping individuals with anxiety, burnout, and stress. So she is a licensed psychotherapist, but also certified to help as a coaching capacity as well. When we talk about anxiety, stress, and burnout, the correlation with ADHD is like they line up, and there's lots of crossover. So Julie, thank you so much for being with us. And I think the first thing to kind of hop into is because I'm glad that you brought this up, that we should focus on starting with this question, because I probably would have skimmed over it, is what is burnout?
Thanks, Sherry. Yeah. So burnout, it's thrown around quite a bit out there, that term. Oh, I'm so burnt out. That you go online, you look up what burnout says. There's all sorts of stuff. The thing is, and why I kind of wanted to talk about it today, is a lot of times what you'll find is it says burnout from like job perspective, right? It's just occupational. And that's not really accurate. There's occupational burnout, but really burnout for the most part is, according to, what is his last name? Chris, from 1980, a study in 1980, burnout is actually a stress response, right? So when you think about burnout in a larger context, it's really a state of chronic overwhelm. Chronic overwhelm. So like physical, mental, emotional overwhelm. It goes on for a long time for lots of reasons. So they started talking about it more from an occupational standpoint, just because that's what people were seeing. Yeah. So that's burnout, chronic overwhelm.
That's such a great way of putting it, and it helps simplify it in my mind, because to your point, there's so many definitions. It's thrown around a lot, and it stems from the occupational piece, but that can apply in the home life, personal relationships, all of those.
Yeah.
So when you're working with clients, or for people listening, what are symptoms that typically arise with burnout?
So, and you brought something up there too, I want to point out. So chronic overwhelm from responsibilities, right? We don't just have responsibility at work. We have so many responsibilities, you know, in the whole life, there's responsibilities. So they just pile up, you know, like all over the place. So, and the other piece sometimes you'll see is kind of commentary that burnout impacts, it's like from one aspect of your life. And I kind of laugh at that, because I feel like, well, you were never burnt out then, because that's not how this works. Like one of them might have kind of been the catalyst, but it's more, it's everything, right?
Yes.
It's all of it, not just one thing. It doesn't have to be that.
If you think of that, pieces of our lives as a pie shape, it's kind of like saying, well, there was mold on one slice, but the rest are fine. But that mold is in there. So yes, totally see what you mean there.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it impacts everything. When we talk a little bit later about what I call the burnout mindset, you'll see that there's no way that it could just be in one area and somehow you didn't go there in the rest of your life. Our brains don't work that way.
Yes.
So you're going to ask something, Sherry?
And there's probably more focus on it from like a career standpoint, because that's where financial impact is noticed more. So stress, leave, short-term, long-term disability, that probably highlighted more of a focus like financially on looking into it more as how can companies avoid this specific to hitting their financial bottom line, when it's like that's the icing on the cake. And I'm sure in my previous career that I was either in burnout or really towing up to the edge, because there were those times when it's just like, what is that one thing that is the last straw? And I remember very specifically this one gentleman, and there was a deliverable that I owed to him, and we were just walking in the factory at the time, and he said, "What, do you have an update on this?" And poor guy, I just cried, because that's how the last straw showed up for me. It's just too much, and I'm disappointed in myself, and I'm pissed off I didn't do it. And he's just like, oh, like back away slowly, don't know how to manage this woman who's typically very strong and has an answer. And now I asked her a simple question and she's crying. What the fuck do I do? Run away.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think it started getting noticed because of financial impact on businesses, not because of anything other than that. So that kind of leads into the symptomology there, right? So it can really look different for lots of people. And then there's this whole other piece we don't have to go into about like what's depression and what's burnout, what's anxiety, what's burnout. And there's been lots of research on that. And there's actually no clear consensus if they're separate or not.
Do you consider them more a Venn diagram, or do you consider them kind of three different categories?
I think they're all in there together.
Yes.
And from a treatment perspective, it doesn't really matter because we want to look at what am I doing with what I have? Where do I want to go? Yes. And how do I deal with right now? What caused it? I mean, sometimes that matters, but I'll talk about why it really matters to focus on what's happening right now first from a treatment perspective. The reason I bring that up, especially with the depression, is sometimes people can be like, oh man, I'm just depressed, right? I'm just sad right now. And so it's hard to suss out. And it's with anxiety and ADHD, with anxiety and burnout for ADHDers, it's hard to suss out because I don't know if you brought this up, but I have ADHD too. It's hard to suss out because a lot of us are always anxious, right? A lot of that anxiety is already built in. So it's like, well, what's anxiety and what's burnout? Well, again, it really doesn't matter because we're looking at how do I work with what's happening. So with symptomology, a lot of times it can be something like just more and more cynical, more and more. Ooh. Nobody gives a fuck.
Oh, you don't have to whisper that. Yeah. We're totally an explicit podcast.
Yeah, nobody gives a fuck. It doesn't effing matter. Whatever I do doesn't matter. It's never going to end. I see no way out. This is it's always going to be like this. Always. And a lot of kind of escape fantasies. Like if you start noticing, when you're sitting around, man, where could I go on my next vacation? It'd really be nice to go here.
Oh, hit the nail on the head. That's what I used to do. I used to leave the country.
Yes.
To escape stress from my job, because even if I took vacation and I didn't leave the country, I still got phone calls.
Yeah.
Because, that's so interesting. The more you talk about it, I'm like nodding along. Yeah. Yes. When you said like those escape fantasies, it's like come home from vacation, plan next vacation, book next vacation.
Yeah. And sometimes while you're even on vacation, you're already planning the next one because you don't want to think about going back to whatever it is that you're trying to get away from. Right.
Yeah. You're like, just jump to the next mountaintop. I don't want to go in the valley.
Yeah. And I think that's a really great point. The more you are trying to avoid the present is a sign of burnout. We do that with anxiety quite a bit too, but there's like a special one with the burnout when I just can't even be here. I'll share some of my own, and I talk about burnout like this because I have been burnt out. I work for myself now because I can no longer do the other. And it took me a long time to heal. But I remember very clearly, we used to live in Nevada and I used to go over to Lake Tahoe and paddleboard. So I loved to paddleboard. The last couple of years I was there, I had a 4-day work week. So I worked 4 10s, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I was in the car over at the lake. In the winter, I was there doing whatever. It was like I could not be where we lived. I had to just leave and be gone all day. And I spent money doing that. So that didn't help financially, right? But I just couldn't go home. And at first I was like, oh, well, it's just I really love to paddleboard. And then later I'm like, this doesn't feel like I'm going to do something that I love. It feels like I have to go because if I don't, I'm going to lose my shit and I can't make it through the next day and the next week. And so when I was gone, I could kind of enjoy it, right? Like once you're on the water, you're just soaking it in. But looking back, I can see where it was barely could I enjoy the present? And you don't have to enjoy the present, but you need to try to be in it some. And when I was home, couldn't be present. Yeah. I didn't want to be in it. It was too much. And the impact of that, not just at work, but with my husband, just my life, I was just missing my life because I could not be present because I was so overwhelmed and stressed out and just exhausted.
Yeah.
So
that really resonates with me. And when you think about burnout and sleep, is there correlation there between impact to sleep. It's kind of like if it impacts your sleep, then you're more mentally challenged the next day. And then it's just a cycle that you get, like, it's challenging to get out of.
Yes, absolutely can impact your sleep, right? And it can do it a couple ways. One, like maybe you won't sleep because you're so anxious about it or you're so worried. So your brain's just going, so you can't go to sleep. And even sometimes, like, you might not be having the thoughts that are keeping you awake because maybe you don't even care that much anymore because you're so sick of it, but your body knows. So you just lay there. Right? Or your sleep quality is crap. And even if you do sleep, a lot of times the quality of sleep, when you wake up, you're not rested. Right? Because you didn't. Right. And we can talk about why this is. Because your brain, your body is in this constant state of stress. And so it's having to use all the energy to like deal with that, process it. So when you're asleep, it's not actually recovering. So you're still exhausted no matter how much you sleep. You could go to sleep all day for 2 days and you would still be exhausted if you're burnt out.
That's hard because a lot of people, life is just going at 100 miles an hour and they're not prioritizing sleep because of a time crunch. So like, what other indicators can somebody look for to identify, like, are they in burnout? Are they toeing the line? Are they like very close?
I think too, more irritability. Yeah.
I feel attacked.
Oh, yeah. More snappy. And you know yourself. You know what's normal for you and what's not. And if you start to see this increase, shorter temper, more snapping, and even internal, like, more reactionary, even internally, even if you're not saying it out loud, like, like just ratcheting up. More of that, kind of like this negative internal talk of, this person's not doing their job. This person's not doing it. If they would just do this, if they would just do this, like there's this negative bias. It's just like everything hitting you. That's there.
Do you also see that negative bias turning in on self?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Right. But just that ratcheting up.
I lived there for so long. I like that. Oh my God, why am I always the one doing all of the things? Because like you and I got the same training a week ago for this and you're coming to me for questions now, even though we got the same information because you spent no time learning it and I spent all the time because of that external pressure I put on myself to know all of the things and not ever need any help. Ooh, yeah.
That is a really great segue into the burnout mindset. Right.
Awesome. Go on.
Before I go there, I do want to caveat all of this. So with burnout, there's a lot of external factors that cause burnout. We know this, especially like in the workplace, there's a lot of systemic structural things that do cause burnout. So when we talk about burnout mindset, we talk about how do I heal burnout? This is in no way saying that this is all my responsibility because it isn't. Right? There is a macro level, a massive amount of freaking work that needs to be done to address this societally. But what can we do? We can still do our own pieces to work within what we have, right? So I just want to make sure that I'm really clear with that. So this is more about like, what can I do? What do I do? How can I shift how I do things? But first we need to kind of look at that mindset, right? Like what can get there? When you said that comment about, I do all this extra work and I did this training and I did this. So, I'm going to do more. That's a little bit of that, right? So let's talk about this burnout mindset. Talk about it on my website, my about page, which is this idea that we were given a handbook. We all got this handbook. And when we were born, as we went through life, and everyone's is different. It kind of came from our family, from society, whatever. And there's this handbook. And we just kind of start doing the things that are in there, right? Whatever it is. And the example I use on there is like this idea of like loading a dishwasher, right? So there's a meme that's been going around for a couple years now about in any relationship, when you load the dishwasher, there's a Scandinavian architect and there's a raccoon on meth. Like, which one are you?
I am the raccoon on meth, without a doubt.
Yeah, I'm the Scandinavian architect.
There's room for that dish.
There's
room for that dish, and I will find it. How dare you start the dishwasher without that one dish?
So there's this meme, and I love it. And it was several years ago, because I've been doing all this work, on learning about, like, just internally learning about burnout, how to heal, and like what processes affect it. And I had always known that I loaded, not always, but I've known for a while because I've been married for about 11 years, 13 years. So I recognize that I load the dishwasher the way that I learned from my mom, right? She loads the dishwasher a certain way. She does the silverware drawer a certain way. And I've always done that a certain way. Yeah. It's my husband, when he would load the dishwasher, would put stuff in differently. And I'd always be like, hey, you know, if you put that bowl there, then it could crack this other bowl, right? So you don't want to put the bowls that way or this thing this way. You want to mess it up. And so for a long time, if he loaded the dishwasher, I'd have this little meh, and I'd go and redo it, right? It was not that big a deal, but still. But one day, I'm like moving his stuff again. And I stopped like mid-move, and I had this bowl in my hand. I was like, holy shit, this is my mom's. Like, this is my mom's thing. Why? Like, is this literally going to break my bowl? And frankly, if it does, like, I can get a new one.
Yes.
How much mental energy does it take for me just to reload a dishwasher? Wow. Because when we start talking about energy versus time, this is important, right? So it was this huge thing of, wow, this is not mine. This is my mom's.
But it was in your handbook then from
it
your
was
mom.
In my handbook, right? From my mom. This is how you do things, right? And that's a pretty simple one, but there's so many more when you think about the thought patterns we have. How do we interact with people? How do we interact with ourselves? You know, are we always supposed to be nice? Is angry okay? Is it not? You know, should we ever be sitting down? If I'm sitting down and not doing anything, am I wasting time? Like, this sounds familiar. I see this. And then you think about ADHD brains, and that's a whole other level here, right? So this handbook, we don't question. We just do it. And we don't ever stop to think, is this mine? Is this how I want to do things? I want to do things as an adult, want to do things. And so it's important to recognize that we have that handbook. And so when I work with folks, we talk about that. Whose voice is here? We start paying attention to whose voice is here that's coming up. The burnout mindset would actually kind of come from, how am I doing things? Am I doing something? Am I doing too much? Am I not asking myself, is this intentionally what I want to do? And so we just put more and more things on our plate, right? So then let's look at time and energy, right? So the brain, there's different studies out there, uses about 25 to 30% of our energy, just existing. So if you think about an entire day, 30% of your energy all day and at night is going to your brain. And then if you work or whatever it is that you do for 8 hours, okay, it's going there. You're thinking, you're moving around, you're doing all that stuff, right? So that's where your energy is going. So our current society, the society we're in right now, is kind of thinking about everything is on time management hacks. Right? Time management.
Yep. Time efficiency, how to fit
Time
3 days into one.
Yes. Well, so what happens is then, if you have the burnout mindset, you're like, all right, I can get up at 6:30, I have to be at work at 8. Okay, that's an hour and a half. I get home at 5, and I'm going to go to bed at 9, so that's 4 hours. So that's for 5.5 hours, right? So what can I fit in 5.5 hours? Sound familiar? So I'm going to write down all these things on my little planner, maybe, depending on your ADHD, but like for anyone, I'm going to write all these things down on my planner. I should be able to fit like 20 things in this. I should be able to, you know, make food for other people, do my side hustle, do my school, clean my house, take time for myself, meditate, take a shower, go to the gym, go shopping. Let's just keep adding to this, right? And that 5.5 hours after I've just worked a whole day.
What does the non-burnout mindset look like?
It's like
that exact example.
It's like, what the fuck? I'm not doing that.
Right. So
it says, let me try to answer this a different way, right? So you can see though, there's no way you can fit that.
Right.
Right. But what happens is, and this is because I want to make sure I put this in here, why it's so important with the burnout mindset. is so, of course, that doesn't happen. Or we can try to make it happen, but then we're more exhausted and it's not sustainable.
It's not 9 p.m. we go to bed. It's midnight because we had this list and these things we need to do and we put this pressure on ourselves. And then that just keeps snowballing too, because then you're so chronically overwhelmed with all of the things.
Yes, with all the things. Or don't get them done. And then what do?
You beat yourself up.
Yep. I'm a loser. I'm a failure. I'm like a horrible parent, a horrible business person, a horrible entrepreneur, a horrible employee.
Tack it on the next day.
And so guess what takes energy? Putting shame on yourself. The emotional cost of beating yourself up is very high. So even if you don't do it, you still are using energy because you're beating yourself up about not doing it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Like, it's crazy. Like, this is what our brains do, right? So the non-burnout mindset is like, Monday night, what's my week look like? Pretty full. Got some pretty stressful stuff. Like today, got to do this podcast. I have another call after that, and then I have 4 clients. And I was thinking about, I'm going to be going somewhere soon. Do I want to add an extra client in today? I could do that. But man, that would be that's going to be exhausting. I have the time, but what's the cost going to be of that from an energy standpoint? Right? So in the past, I would have been like, oh yeah, let's try to stick 2 more people in there. Let's just get all this done. Or I'd feel bad about not doing it. But now it's like the energy cost is going to be too high. Right? So if you think about a car, and I don't know why I use a car because I'm not really into cars, but from like a gas tank perspective, so a car and a gas tank's capacity holds 14 gallons. And, depending on things, you can get a certain amount of mileage out of that. When your car runs out of gas, are you pissed at the car because it couldn't hold more gallons?
Right.
Or it couldn't get more mileage out of it when you were driving up a hill, at 90 degrees for a day? No, you wouldn't get pissed at it. You'd be like, wow, that's how much energy is in the freaking car. That's how much it can hold. But we speak differently to ourselves.
Like Val and I are the queen of analogies, and I think maybe that's an ADHD thing too. But like, you don't run your car right out of gas. You're like, oh, I have 50 kilometers left. I should go fill it up. You fill it up before it gets empty. You don't run it right into the ground, except maybe a few occasions when you're like, oh, I'm out of gas now, and I have to call for service. So it's like, you can go a little further with that. Like if I run it right out of gas and I'm on the side of the road, I either can't help myself because I'm too far away, or what I can do to help myself involves me walking to a gas station, buying a can, filling it up, walking back, or calling somebody and spending a lot of time or money to get gas. Like, ooh, that's a good analogy. I like that one.
Yeah, it really is about paying attention to energy. How much energy do I have for this? With the time that's going to be available, how much energy I'm going to have. So it's like really focusing on that energy piece is how to have a non-burnout mindset. So you can think about that, but what happens, what gets in the way of these old patterns, this old handbook of how I should be doing things, right? I should be doing it this way. So it's hard for people at first to switch to that. So I do a lot of work with that. Let's look at what's getting in the way of this, and just start paying attention, right? So that's the burnout mindset. And what else did we want to cover?
Well, we talked about this before we started recording, but like the talk of ADHD, we tend to live in a feeling of we have to work harder at things than neurotypicals in a lot of situations. So what takes, I have to make a phone call. I'm going to overthink the shit out of that. I am going to delay it for a couple of days. And ultimately, I'm going to realize, oh, that phone call took me 3 minutes and wasn't any stress at all, but I'm still going to do it again the next time.
Yes.
Whereas like a neurotypical could be just like, need to make a phone call, make phone call, done. I didn't write it on my to-do list for 3 days. I didn't beat myself up about it. ADHD can lend to, well, everything's just harder for me. So this isn't burnout. This isn't anxiety. This is just how I live. So I'm just going to keep plugging along.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So there was a study in 2021 that 90% of ADHD folks have burnout or have had burnout symptoms. 90. And at the time, they said that, according to this thing that I read, that like 30% of the general pop had burnout. Now, I don't agree with that. I think that's much higher now too, especially post-COVID. But it is definitely very, very high in ADHD folks. So I would say if someone was on the fence, like, do I have it? I would just go ahead and assume that I do. Because honestly, like if you think about it from an energy standpoint, right? You just brought it up. How much energy it takes to do everything. And so I already have that. But if I'm in the other piece here and why it's important to start checking into this is like, we adapt to a certain level of stress, right? That becomes our normal. And so it's like, well, no, this is fine until something else gets added and we lose our shit or we can't cope. And so honestly, it's almost better to be kind of like doing some preventive work here of looking at it. Like I might not be, but let me just see. Like, what's my take on how do I approach these things? What's my take on when I don't get stuff done? Am I beating myself up about it? You know, am I trying to put too many things in there? Because even if I don't have burnout, it's still going to be better for me overall to take stuff off my plate, start paying attention to what is actually really, really important. If I'm looking at my life as a whole and what kind of values I'm living and what's important to me.
And that's Val and I talk a lot about that too with money. Look at what's important to you, your values, what you want your life to look like, and align your spending with that. So if you can align your time spending with that too. It's like, so then that leads into, I'm nodding along to a lot of these things. Our listeners are probably like, yep, I'm there, I'm towing the line, or I'm in burnout. Where can somebody start to turn that around?
Always start with folks like this. I think I got this from my meditation teacher. It's like for any given situation, there are two pieces that have to happen before I take action, right? There's the internal experience that I'm having that I need to address. And then there's logistics, right? So, you know, Jessica McCabe, she does a how-to ADHD YouTube channel. She's awesome. But there's a couple videos on there called The Wall of Awful that I absolutely love. And the idea is that like everyone has this. There's like this little bricks that we lay and build this wall in front of us. Everyone has them, but ADHDers are higher, of course. So, and there are these bricks of like shame and past experience and time and all this stuff. And before we can do anything, we have to acknowledge the wall is there, right? For me, like this phone call, what's happening and what's happening right now in my body? What emotions do I have? What resistance do I have? Can I identify why they're there? Like sometimes that's important, sometimes not. But the fact of just acknowledging what's happening internally, what emotions, what bodily sensations are going on. I can't make a step in doing something really sustainably unless I've acknowledged what's happening internally. Because then that impacts what am I going to do? If I acknowledge internally that I'm exhausted and I'm really tired, but there's this thing I need to do, then maybe acknowledging that I can be like, okay, let me break this task down more than I would normally, right? Which is super important for ADHD folks. But like, you know, for this finance thing, because I was doing some stuff for you the other day and I was like, I had this one sentence written down about what I needed to do. And I kept like looking away from it, you know, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, oh, well, I probably need to actually like break that into like 15 flipping categories before I can do it because my brain it was too much.
Yep.
So by recognizing, oh, I'm having this resistance, I'm having this reaction to this, acknowledging, okay, something's going on there. Let's see what it is. Oh, I'm really actually afraid. I'm afraid of this. I'm not wanting to do it because I'm really tired. Okay, then how can I do this? And then spending the time to break it down into smaller pieces. So then I could, and that's the logistics, right? But I can't do the logistics until I've done the internal part. And so even just starting there is a huge piece. What's happening internally for me in any given situation? Because that's what emotions are. They're just information that's trying to tell you something.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's challenging. I've gone through so much transition, and for me, it took getting fired to really go through that transition. But all of the things you're saying is like, yes, I lived there, and I've done a 180, and I really prioritize my sleep now more than I ever have. I'm meditating, journaling, doing all the things like boundaries around when I do work things and when I see clients, and that evolution. It's tough. And when I think about how could I have made changes while I was still employed if I had that realization of like, ooh, this is where I live. Somebody talks to me and I want to punch them in the face. And that's not good. And how could I have done things differently to support myself to stay in that career path and in that job? And there's definitely things I could have done to put more boundaries around keeping work at work. And even that awareness of I'm carrying this work burden 24/7 and how can I put it down?
Right. You just reminded me of something else I want to make sure that I said here. So the other piece that you can notice, because I noticed this when I left my job, I was lucky enough to be able to take a pretty good chunk of time off before starting this, which allowed me to notice some of these things that helped me come up with kind of a burnout mindset idea, was that when you sit down and you're trying to relax, it's coming up. It's so hard because people say, oh, I took the weekend off. I wanted to relax. And I didn't. It's like if you actually make time to sit down and relax, but you're not relaxing because you're A, thinking about what you should do, B, it's not okay for you to relax, all that stuff, then what's the fucking point, right? You're not actually, you can do self-care all day long. And by self-care, I mean like, bubble baths and go for a walk or all that. But if you're not able to actually enjoy it, or if it doesn't feel like you can enjoy it, then that's a huge sign that you do need to work on something, right? Yeah. And so then the piece is, okay, start noticing, I'm not able to relax. I'm trying to take time for myself, but I'm not relaxing. What's going on there? Whose voice is telling me it's not okay?
Mine,
right? But it came from somewhere. But is this really what I want to, is this where I want to stay? Because that's what keeps people in burnout. Yeah. Because I could have stopped working if I wouldn't have started to notice and allowed myself to be okay with just not doing anything or doing things for me, then I would never have healed. Yeah. That's the other piece that has to come there too.
Yeah. We just have a few minutes left, so I want to address this because we can't, especially as ADHDers, hold all of the responsibility ourselves. So when should somebody realize, okay, no, I can't do this on my own. I should seek help? What are some things that can help somebody know, like, no help, I need help?
Well, if they've kind of tried doing some of what I'm talking about,
and honestly tried,
right? Like I'm going to, come up with something, try to do it, and it's not helping. Or they're like, I kind of understand, but I'm not getting it, right? I'm still struggling with this. I'm still frustrated. I'm having resistance to doing this, like trying it, but I'm really resisting it. What else is there? It's hard to get to that space, and it's really helpful to have someone who's completely objective talk to you about it. You might hear things you don't want to hear, and that's okay.
But if you think of it like being a scuba diver, and I've never gone diving in my life, and I have all the gear, you've just given me the tools. Go ahead, go under the water, go deep, see what happens. I want a guide instructor or a dive instructor. I want someone to be down there with me because it's dark and it's scary and they've done this a million times. So I would say everyone should have someone like you, but I'm biased.
Yeah, it's the reason why, like, coaching for my clients is effective too. Yes, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I am not sharing anything that I don't share in my blog post that's not out there if you Google it. But when it's like, okay, I'm an objective set of eyes coming in looking, and we all are with our clients. We're an objective set of eyes, and we're not emotionally in it like the client is. And we can shorten the path by saying, okay, I'm seeing this. here's some suggestions to make that path shorter. And also that like, but then we're going to meet again at this time. So
accountability.
That accountability is key.
Yes, it is huge, right? And everything is, it's all very, therapy and coaching with me is all very action oriented. You're not just sitting there talking and then you leave. Like, it's like, what are we going to do? What experiments are you going to try this week to see how things work out? And then we come back and how did it go?
Yeah.
Like,
I
there's
love that.
piece.
Like experiments.
Yeah.
Experiments. Because that's what they are. We're going to try them, see how they work. They're going to stick or they're not. And then we're going to try something new if they didn't. I love that.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Is there anything else, Julie, that you want to share before we wrap things up?
Yeah. So for burnout specifically, I am starting a course in January online. It's a 6-week course for burnout. It'll be 1 hour a week. So short, you know, I'll be posting on that soon on like social media stuff.
Awesome. And we're going to drop the link so that people can connect with you on socials as well. So they can connect if that's something that they're interested in January.
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Amazing.
I'm excited about it.
Thank you for your expertise and your time and your energy. We appreciate it.
We're so glad you've been here, and we can't wait to see you next time on the Mind and Money podcast. Have a great day.
Thanks.